Hi, thank you very much. I don't know if we got to change the presentation. Thank you very much to the people that organized the conference and also to the Danish Cultural Institute that they invite us to this place. But sure, the first issue or the first question that you should have, what do a guy from Chile talking about microregion? It's so fun, no? The fact in last time that we were here in Riga talking about this was one of very interesting question. Some very polite architect has told us that she was very happy because we showed these pictures, because she understood that she see in that moment that we don't understand anything about this issue. And in some way, it is correct. We really are not a specialist in this. You know more that we can know about microregion. Nevertheless, we have some common issues. This is not just a problem in Europe. In Europe, lives around 40 million of people in these kind of buildings, 34 in Eastern European countries and 6 of them in Western European countries. But if you see this picture, this is Chile. And this is a kind of microregion also. I lived there some year when I was a student at the university. Was 8,000, 10,000 people living in this kind of building, from the 50s and 60s also. But they have a slight difference in Latin America. They belong more to the modernist movement. They belong to the kind of architecture that was a kind of inspiration for the city. And now, this kind of building are in a process of restoration, of recovering, but mainly the public space and some apartments. Some years ago, we moved to Denmark, basically because the strong welfare state in the Scandinavian countries. And that could be, for us, very interesting to try to move the high quality of architecture from the Scandinavian countries to other countries. I should say before that when we finished the university 20 years ago, we decided to move in the opposite address that the most of the architects. We will not try to be famous. We try to work with the more difficult cases, with the more difficult social cases. And most of the architects weren't working in that issues. Most of the architects work for the richest upper class and for the more expensive part countries of societies. In our case, we decided exactly the opposite. And for that reason, we moved to Denmark to try to learn how they build a so equal society. This is a case, for instance, a kind of, it's not a microregion, but it's a kind of group of buildings that from the 60s in Copenhagen, that now they are recovering, and they are doing this. They are recovering also the buildings and the public space. One of the main difference, maybe with the Latvia microregion, is the public space, and we will talk about this in a minute. However, just to show what we are doing in other places and why we are interested in this issue, is because we developed a methodology some years ago called academic methodology for the universities called Workshop 5x5. This workshop showed 5 extreme cases in the world when architecture could be useful. In this picture, you can see Dharavi, one of the hugest slums on the world, with an enormous density. You can see here the streets are almost, some of them have a meter or 80 centimeters. So almost it's not a space. And what architecture can do in these cases? That is one of the questions that we do to our students. And this is one of the projects. Just to give more density, to build some kind of bamboo towers in these small spaces that we can use, these small streets, just to have a kind of legs with bamboo, and people can sleep in these areas, just sleep. this isn't the limit of the ethic of architecture, because we are not building houses. We are building just places to sleep, to relieve a little bit the high density during the night. Or this project in Cairo, in Egypt, is called Garbage City, is a place where, of course, no famous architect will go to work there, because it's almost impossible. In these cases, more than the final product of the architecture is the most interesting is the process. The most of the time, the architects spend their time and their energies in the whole process of the architecture. In this situation, you can see garbage in everywhere. This is in the middle of Cairo, in the center of the city. And this is a group of religious people, Catholic, that they recycle the garbage of the whole city, that what the architecture can do in these cases. And one of the propositions is just to give shadow to the streets with the same materials that they can recycle. Well, in this, continue with these examples. This is not just an issue of the so-called, in a, I believe the wrong way, the third world. Also this happened in the most developed countries. In Copenhagen, for instance, there are around 3,000 or 4,000 homeless. And they are homeless not because the state don't take care about them. They are homeless because several reasons. One of them, and they don't want to be part of the society. Then what we can do with this kind of people? The project was to create a labyrinth of containers that could be totally open and they can sleep inside. Please, I am not saying that this is a case of Latvia, just I am showing some situation that we used to work. This is no relation with Latvia. This is finally the project, and this is how people use this project. The interesting point in this, that we built that, and the interesting point that we should find a kind of gap in the law, because the Scandinavian law is very strict, is very rigid with the construction, with the housing. Then you cannot build a house without electricity, without toilet, without isolation, without doors. You cannot do that. But we found that was in a part of the law, say if you build a piece of art, you can have this piece of art on the street for 6 months. Then this is not a house, this is a piece of art. And we say that also the title of the project is "This is not a home." This was the title. And in this way, also we should try to find with the law, with the condition that we have. Another case of my country, this is a school, it's almost fall down during the 70s, was built during the 70s, and in the 90s was in very bad conditions because the materials and because the earthquake in Chile. That maybe you don't know, but we have an enormous line of earthquake. And the government decided to build a new school with cement and iron. That this is the normal way that in Chile you build the schools. But in this area, south of Chile, is very similar to Latvia. They have a lot of timber, goods, forest, and no one knew to work with cement and iron. Then we tried to build a school with timber to use the local carpenters, and this was almost impossible. During 4 years, we were fighting with the government to convince them that it was possible to build a house with timber, especially with the contemporary condition of the timber. And finally they accept, and we got to build 50% more of the square meters with the same budget, just because we use a local technical. And this is the project in the today. Well, but now we will enter to the matter. Just this was a kind of introduction to give a perspective why we are working in these issues. First, that we are not just foreigners. We work in the workshop with the Riga Technical University in May, and here is all the people that work in this workshop. All the people that is involved in this project was people from Italy, Denmark, France, one of them is here, Latvia, of course, Tamara, Sane, Sandra, Ugis, and it was a very interesting group that we were working for 2 weeks to try to create a kind of idea in relation with what we can do with microregions, and especially with this case, you should know Pursier. Well, the situation for us was very interesting in a professional way. What happened when when a country passed from a socialist system to a capitalist system? What is the friction that happened in that moment? I am talking just in a professional way. I will not enter to the political issues, of course, but to see that, to watch that phenomenon is really extremely interesting. Here you can see how was the division of the land during the 40s in that area. It's more or less was a kind of rural division of the land. You can see what happened during the 65 to 78 in the same area when all the land passed to the state, and how appeared this building in a kind of urban compositional geometrical division of the space. This was the kind of apartment that have this microregion, and this happened when the land back to the private owners. This was the situation. This was the superposition of the building with the land. Of course, was no relation between these two systems. And this is the situation that you well know during the years 2002-2006, when appeared new buildings in these areas. And you know exactly what is happening here. Two different models, despite that the buildings could look more or less similar, but it's two different models. Private parkings, private terraces or something, and how these two different models crash, or how these two different models can enter in contact or can live together in a kind of social harmony. Well, and this is one of the propositions of the municipality. Maybe it is not exactly in this, please correct me, this is not exactly in this way, but they try to create a new division of the land in a way to recognize that here was a friction that was not solved. Here was something that was not solved. If you remember the two projects that I showed before, the project in Chile, when the government started to do these public spaces, and the project in Denmark, when they rebuild the buildings, or recover the buildings, and redesign the public space, basically it was allowed because the space, the public space, is of the state, or is of the collective, it's not private. Then that allowed to work in a urban way, in a urban planning in these areas, in the case of Chile and Denmark. It's not the case of Latvia. But well, still we have this amount of free square meters. It's an enormous amount of square meters, despite that most of them belong to private owners, but still they are free. They have not buildings over these square meters. And all this kind of theoretical and philosophical political system finally have a repercussion in personal histories. We can talk in a very huge perspective, but finally, here is some person that have some dreams. Here is another person that sit down in some bench every day, and suddenly the landscape change. Or another one that walk with her dog every day for somewhere, and this is full of personal histories. And we should be able to mix all these different levels. How these minimum personal histories can affect also the urban planning. This is a kind of map with these histories, with these small histories. What is happening in this area? What is happening in this area or here? This is to try to map these tales. And this was another interesting exercise in the same workshop where the author of this drawing is here. I don't know, there is there. And was to imagine different scenarios. What happened if? What happened in this case if is no investment, no money for this area, yet total control of the state? That it was what happened during the 90s or before the 90s. Sure, this building will collapse soon. It's not, no one invest. What happens if we have a minimum investment and the tenants or apartment owners try to get a social organization to invest a little bit of money with the support of the state? Sure, this process will postpone, but the collapse will come again because it's a so huge amount of buildings and so huge amount of money that they need. And what happens if we have a high investment? For landowners, for the people that the property of the, they have the property of the land, and no control of the state. This, in general, happen the same, come to some kind of crisis or collapse in one moment. Maybe it's not a collapse of the new buildings, but it's a crash, a social crash. And this could be some future situation if everyone decides, for instance, to have fences in their land property. And we say scenario number 4, what happens if we try to create a social agreement? And between all these different actors, especially to add new actors, architects, municipal office statistics, flat owner, developers, sociologists, blah, blah. This is not exactly what is all the actors that could be here, but we know that we need more actors in this case. It's not just a problem between the flat owners and the landowners. It's 50% of Riga, people of Riga is living in this case. Then it's not just a problem of them, it's a problem of the whole process. And one of the most interesting points in this case, this is the key issue, is that the land cannot continue being the collective, or the public space now cannot continue being private. You should try to find some kind of solution for that. And one solution, one is not just this. This could be with a lot of problems, we know, with a lot of small letters and difficult cases. One of the possibilities could be to change the square meters of landowners of the property for a square meter of buildings. That is totally different. If I have a piece of land inside of the microregion, if I were the owner of this, I pay taxes, and I cannot build anything because the neighbors will complain, or because it could be very difficult, or if I build some apartment there, I will not get the best price because site is a building that is in bad conditions. Maybe I could consider the possibility that to change that right, the right of my landowner, for square meters, and to build that square meter in somewhere, could be in the same microregion or in another place. What it means, basically, that we could give a kind of new economical value. Yes, I finish now. We can give a new economical value, and could be more transferable, more negotiable in different markets. Now, if I have this piece of land, this land have problems, difficult, with a lot of difficulty. I could send, or I could deal with that piece of land. Maybe it's better for some people to have the possibility to change this right for another kind of right. Also, the Danish law say that the way to compensate people that was owner of this land was not just to back the land, was also to give another kind of compensation that is not specifically clear in the law, but say other kind of compensation. Could be money, could be another things, and this could be one of the possibilities. And we start to study what, this will be very fast, the explanation of this, what places we could build something that not affect the collective space. And this is one of the perspectives that how it could be during the 2030 or 2020. The public space always is the space of the democracy, is the space of the collective, the common life. Then we need that this space could continue being democratic. And maybe in this case, we can invite famous architects to develop some of the buildings in this case. But this could be in 2030. And also we have other options like this, or this that is interesting because it was made for a student in Chile. No, because the perspective is interesting. I don't agree exactly with that. But we made this exercise in Chile for a student that they don't know Latvia, and they don't know Riga, less they don't know Pursievs, but they do this. Well, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jorge. Thank you for a very eloquent presentation and spreading ideas around the world.